I'm Roald Malianke. I teach Korean studies at the ANU and currently the director of the ANU Korea Institute. I don't think so, not really, and certainly not to the extent that fans of K-pop are fans of K-pop. There are songs that I really like, and there are videos that I've watched way more than I should, but I don't think I'm a real fan. Yeah, perhaps I should be, but then there's always that danger that your hobby becomes your work and that there is no longer a healthy distinction, and you kind of need another hobby. So for me, sometimes doing this work is a delight because I see all kinds of stuff that I haven't seen before. And I suppose that if you take a fan, and there are, as you know, there are tens of thousands here in Sydney, off the street and make them do my work, they will very soon be looking for a new hobby, I think. I worked a lot on folk music, and whenever I was talking to my friends in Korea about folk music, I could see they were like trying to remember stuff that really they never actually knew. They were trying to help me, but what they were listening to themselves was completely different, of course. My friends, when I was studying in Korea in the late 80s and early 90s, were listening to stuff like, I guess, early 90s, 서태지. And so I was always intrigued by what was going on in that area as well. And when I was writing a lot, I started to realize that actually very few people were writing about it. So I did feel that I needed to know more, I wanted to know more, and then when in the late 90s, the Korean wave kind of started to happen. First, I found these newspaper articles talking about HOT in China. I realized that, yeah, it was time to write about it, because many of the things that you write about when you write about traditional music are the same, right? So the audience responses are very important. There is no tradition, so to speak. You have to constantly evolve. You have to always do better than the competition. It's very competitive. Looks are important. It's the same with folk songs, right? So I've studied folk songs a lot, and I look at these young people studying folk songs, and they're worried about their looks and their presentation and their clothes, and so there's a lot of overlap really in terms of the experience from the point of view of the performers as well as the audience. So it's not been a waste of time if I wanted to only do traditional music, but it's been very helpful for me to get to know more and get to understand better what Korean culture is about. It'll be different for everybody else. So for me personally, what I find amazing about K-pop is the perfect the perfect presentation of this type of music. So the artists look perfect, they move perfect, and they behave in a perfect way. And so it's almost as if it comes out of a computer. And it needs to have just enough, let's say, street cred for it to be considered real. Because if you didn't know, you'd almost think that some of these acts were really just CGI. And it doesn't really bring up strong emotions that are not related to, let's say, love or stress at school. And sometimes I think that is lacking. But it's just such a wonderful package. I mean, you just can keep looking at it. I always tell my students that I never listen to K-pop because I'm already watching it. Why would I go away from my screen and just listen to it? I suppose a lot of people do because they already have the visuals in their head. But without the visuals, I think we would be losing out terribly. It's just beautiful to look at. Both the boys and the young women are just fantastic performers. The difference, I think, lies in the role of the performers. I think that's a key aspect. So the performers here in K-pop are focusing more on dance and on performing a lot of material that has been produced for them. And therefore, in some ways that allows them to perhaps step away from some concerns and focus more on the real presentation, focus on their dance. A lot of it is lip synced when it's live, and focus on the look of it. And I noticed that whenever I go to a live concert of K-pop, that a lot of the performers perform and move on stage very much like they do in the videos. Whenever they arrange these live concerts, the background is again exactly like it is in the video, and so it's a reenactment. And that is rather different, I believe, from Western and Australian music. And sometimes that is also a small problem, because people of my age here in Australia will expect music to touch them. And sometimes the sounds actually touch me. Then when of course, I understand the lyrics, Australians wouldn't. When I listen to the lyrics, they rarely relate to me. But on top of that, I also know that they haven't really been involved in the creative process. And that makes it a little bit hard for me to become a fan. Because you want to, in a way, I think real fans want to be a bit like what we call I guess in Latin, a mecenas, a patron of the arts, so to speak. And so when you're really passionate about some new product, you want to support that creativity because you want to keep it going. And that sometimes, I think, needs to be stronger within K-pop. So yeah, that's the tricky thing. That is one of the main differences, I believe. You just have to look at it. It's K-pop is it's new, it's exciting, it's setting new boundaries, and so in itself it should really continue to do quite well, I think. They are reinventing themselves just enough for it to continuously be fresh. I guess in order for Australians to go to embrace it even further, what we would need is to show people how difficult it is to be a member of a K-pop act. So instead of, So You Think You Can Dance, that TV series, we need So You Think You Can Be a K-pop idol, and get the contestants to not only do the dance, which is already very hard, but also the lip syncing, some of the solo singing, to behave properly throughout, performing 10 times a day, waking up at 4, talking to the media, a lot of pressure, etc., etc. It's a very hard job, and I think Australians would embrace it if they understood how hard it is. I suppose a lot of it is already happening. I mean, I would love to see even more than there already is. But the dance has become associated with K-pop. The dance, I'm talking about K-pop dance, and most people will know what I'm talking about. That is already quite a feat. As you know, there's pole dancing has become such an international phenomenon, despite its associations. Because it's also very good for the body, and it really is, it's good for men and women to tone their physique. I think K-pop dance could be one of those things too, and you do see that more and more, and so perhaps we could start to also see that as not just a creative art form, but a form of exercise. A very positive one, because it's fun. So you had Zumba, right? We had Zumba for a while, that's gone again. We've had pole dancing. And I think K-pop dance should be the next big thing, and hopefully it'll stay for a while, because I used to play squash for a few years next to a Zumba class, and it was a lot of fun. It's very hard to play squash because you start to try and play rhythmically when the music next to you is Zumba music. I think my game would have been a lot better had I been playing next to K-pop dance classes. Yeah, thank you. So I suppose these are two things that have come out recently. This came out, this is my first collaboration. This came out in 2014, and last month it came out as a paperback. It's an interesting collection of articles on K-pop, a kind of the broad gamut of K-pop. So it's about fandom in particular, and I thought it was an interesting collection of studies. I don't think my own work is very good, but I think some of the articles, some of the chapters in here are really worth checking out. So I would recommend this, at least recommend people to check it out. It may not be what they're looking for, but it certainly has a few very interesting case studies, particularly when people are interested in what fandom means. Also last month, this came out. This is my own book, so I in some ways I should be more proud of this. It's just really new, so at the moment I'm just still sending out copies to people who helped me write this book. It is a study of how the experience of colonialism has affected the preservation of traditional music in Korea. So it talks about Japanese styles that persist in Korean music. It talks about approaches to the study of traditional music that actually are very much Japanese. It talks about how a lot of people still consider Japan to be the yardstick, and they try to compete with Japan. And it talks about the whole system. So this whole system of so-called human treasures, 인간 문화재, and how the system set up by the Japanese during the colonial period, and how that system has also created several problems. And so I focus in particular on the folk songs in and around Seoul, and I look at how that system, the act of appointing people to preserve the three main genres, which are Gyeonggi Minyo, songs from Gyeonggi province, then Sodosori, so songs from Seoul and now North Korea, and then Sonsori Santaryang, so the standing mountain songs, how they have kind of been changed either before or after nomination, and of course that's a slight problem when the system itself actually creates issues with the, let's say, authenticity of the art form.